Welcome to a Legendarium special about the Australian Rum Rebellion of 1808. In this episode, we will learn about the third mutiny that William Bligh endured during his storied career in the Royal Navy. Around the year 1800, the British colony in Australia had a European population of less than 7,000 and struggled to survive. Sydney remained a garrison town, most of its buildings centered around the military. The colony endured regular food shortages, had little infrastructure, and no hard currency because London failed to provide. So Indian rum, imported since 1792, became the colony's currency. The rum trade fell into the hands of the New South Wales Corps, made up of 700 soldiers and officers. Its officers enjoyed land grants, free labor from assigned convicts, and the right to trade in Indian rum. Governors came and went, but the ambitious and wily Captain John MacArthur controlled the rum trade, and thus Australia. Word of the great power held by MacArthur reached London, and the Colonial Office sent William Bligh to Australia in August 1806. He had orders to control the rum trade and end the corruption festering in the Corps. Unfortunately, the longtime Royal Navy officer arrived with no soldiers. While a capable and strong man, the shouting and bad-tempered Bligh used strict discipline to control his men. This already failed to control his infamous first mate Fletcher Christian during the mutiny on the Bounty 17 years earlier. Bligh became the victim of a second mutiny while commanding the H.M.S. Director during the Great Mutiny of 1797, when all but 4 ships in the British fleet overthrew their captains. Bligh's patron, Sir Joseph Banks, warned Bligh that MacArthur would be his main enemy. Before Bligh's arrival, MacArthur resigned his command before he could be court-martialed for striking his commanding officer. Immediately, Bligh and MacArthur began fighting over a 10,000-acre land grant that MacArthur claimed he had been promised by the previous governor. Of course, Bligh refused to confirm such a vast grant to a man who profited by illegal trade. Governor Bligh won few other friends when he banned bartering and ordered those ships in port to be secured before the Corps could seize the precious rum. Bligh further ordered the destruction of illegal stills and banned the bartering of spirits for grain, labor, food, or any other goods, especially rum. Ever dedicated to law and order, on January 25, 1808, Governor Bligh brought MacArthur up on charges for refusing to pay a fine. Since the New South Wales Corps controlled the court, the trial went nowhere. An infuriated Governor Bligh ordered that the members of the court present themselves to him so they could face charges of treason. MacArthur easily persuaded a New South Wales Corps commander named George Johnston to help him. On January 26, 1808, the 20th anniversary of the colony's founding, Johnston marched the entire Corps to Government House, where they found Governor Bligh. Later, the Corps claimed they dragged Governor Bligh out from under his bed. Regardless of where they found Bligh, Johnston and MacArthur took control of the colony, claiming to have overthrown an illegal tyrant. The former governor remained under arrest in Government House with his widowed daughter for a year. He refused the rebels' insistence that he return home until March 1809, when the rebels encouraged Bligh aboard a ship at gunpoint. Yet once aboard his ship, the H.M.S. Porpoise, Bligh sailed for Van Diemen's Land and sought help from Lieutenant Governor David Collins. When Collins refused to help, Bligh remained there for another year. While Bligh remained in Van Diemen's Land, a new governor named Lachlan Macquarie arrived in Sydney. He came with hundreds of heavily armed friends who encouraged the New South Wales Corps to end their corrupt rule and disband themselves. By the time that Bligh found a ship that would take him home to Britain, Johnston and MacArthur already arrived in London, trying to justify their self-serving actions to the court-martial. Bligh thus had the satisfaction of watching his two enemies squirm in the courtroom. At first, London ordered MacArthur to return to Australia to face trial for treason. MacArthur delayed until 1817, when London allowed him to return to Australia if he played no further role in politics. He returned, kept his promise and lived out his days quietly. However, the courts did dismiss Johnston from military service, and he too would return to Australia as a settler. Governor Bligh's wife, emotionally spent by the constant attacks upon her husband and her own efforts to comfort him, died shortly after his return home. Bligh spent his last 5 years in Farningham, Kent, cheered by the company of his 6 daughters. He never went to sea again, but fared better than his enemies, retiring a vice admiral and dying in 1817, a decade after the third and final mutiny against him. The Rum Rebellion remains Australia's only coup, though other unpopular governors in British colonies found themselves retired at gunpoint during the 19th century. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.